Good morning, genealogy friends. We have a pretty good topic today, so I hope you guys will find this helpful. I wanted to talk about different types of photos from the 19th century because knowing different types of photos can help you date them. It can also help you not ruin them. I'm going to hold this still and give it a minute for people to pop on. And we'll do some quick updates. Thank you to everybody who bought the left-handed pages yesterday. I have gotten some feedback. I've already seen some people using them for full layouts. It's kind of exciting. One of my books isn't printed and I'm now thinking about making the whole thing double-sided, but I haven't completely converted. That's the thing. I know a lot of you are pretty well into your book. And if you're using GoodNotes, it's easy to just use the lasso to copy things over onto a left-sided page. But if they're already printed, I totally understand that. Okay, let's do some quick updates. Good morning. Nothing really major today. I'm not putting anything new in the shop today. I did want to say I have 25 people maybe waiting to come into the Family Tree Notebooks genealogy group. The thing that those people all have in common is that they haven't answered the membership questions. So they now have to wait until I can stalk them and make sure that they're not weird spammy bots. And I don't know when I'll have time to stalk people, so just answer the membership questions. Also, there's been a surge of people signing up for the email newsletter so they can get the free pages, the pages that come when you sign up for the email newsletter, you get 3 free pages, and a lot of people use this to just make a free notebook until they're ready to jump over. There's been a surge of people, and because of that, I think some people weren't getting their freebies. If you're in that camp, just email me. I can fix that. It's not a big deal. Okay, let's talk about photo types. All right, so photos changed very rapidly over the course of about 60 years. And the earliest kind of photo was this. So this is called a daguerreotype. And what it is it's this piece of copper that's silver plated, and then the photo is printed on there. And you can tell that it's a daguerreotype because the image seems to be floating. I don't know if you can see as I move around. And this image is very hard to see. And as I shift, I'm not sure if you can really see the depth, but it's like you can see that the image is really printed on this thin sheet, and then you can see black paper behind it. It looks like a negative, and that's basically how it's printed. So you have to view it as at an angle. And daguerreotypes, they're always going to be in these cases because they're multiple layers. And you can actually open this. I'm not going to do that right now. I thought about it, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to deal with handling this and opening with one hand and all that sort of stuff. This is actually from my husband's family. So unlike my prop photos that I use, I am not willing to let anything happen to this photo. But if you wanted to, you could open these, pop it out, and look at the different layers. Now here's the thing. This photo is in really poor condition. Now I wonder if I can do this now. See the phone is right on top of it. But if you look at it straight on, it's very hard to see the image. And if you look at it, from an angle, you can see a better image of this family. I believe that these are the Wehr sisters, W-E-H-R. Now, incredibly tempting to clean this, right? Cleaning it would improve the photo. Here's the thing. You don't want to clean these. I don't know. There's no other way to say it. You just don't want to. You can take them somewhere and have them restored. The best thing to do is to take the best scans that you can and work with that. You can clean up a scan without having to clean up the original. The reason that you don't want to touch these is that they're just way too delicate. I took this in to talk to an expert at the last Roots Tech Expo, and he told me the saddest story that he had somebody who had a photo like this, and she wanted to clean it. She opened it up, and I don't know if she just used water or Windex or whatever, and she went to wipe it away. She wiped the photo away. These are not, the daguerreotypes could not be copied. This is, you took the photo and then this is what you got. You got one small image. So if you hurt this image, you're not going to be able to find that image again. This is totally moment captured in amber. This is it. So you really you want to leave it alone and scan it. Now, you also might have a image that looks like this, but it's sharper. It doesn't have to be viewed at an angle. You know, it's in the same small case, but you can look at it right on and you can tell what the photo is. That's probably not a daguerreotype. That's going to be an ambrotype. Daguerreotypes and ambrotypes were almost on top of each other as far as when they came out, but daguerreotypes came out first. They first came out in 1839, and then they kind of had lost popularity by 1860. And ambrotypes were, well, to be fair, ambrotypes are much later, because ambrotypes come out in the 1850s. They came out in 1854, and then they're popular for, I mean, maybe 10 years. But ambrotypes were on silvered glass, and they smudged. You can still smudge them. You don't want to clean those either. They were still one of a kind, but the image was much sharper, and they were just easier to see. I don't actually have an ambrotype to show you. Sorry, I have not invested in an ambrotype. Maybe if I'm a good girl, Santa will put one in my stocking. But right now, all I have is this daguerreotype to show you. Anyway, I mean, this was, up until this, you know, you really had to rely on somebody drawing you or painting you, and so this was a big deal. And obviously, like, this is hard to see. When they purchased this, it was easier to see than this, and there was no other expectation. You know, this was as good as it got when these came out, but they were kind of pricey, so you didn't have, this is not something that everybody could do. And because you just got this one small portrait and you couldn't really share it, they weren't not popular, but it was not a situation where you went and you had, you know, 10 of these made for your children. So that changes with the tintype. Now, I think most of you are familiar with tintypes. Tintypes look like this. So a tintype is it's not actually tin, it's iron. It's a blackened iron plate, and they were a whole lot cheaper. So these came out, the first tintype was in 1856, and they were really popular between like 1860, 1870. They were everywhere, and people had tintype studios, and you went and this is how you got your portrait done. Now you can see, I mean, the difference between these, the tintypes they were cheaper to make, so they were cheaper to buy, and they were easier to store and carry because they were so much smaller, and the image was just better. It was sharper because it was flat. You know, you could touch it, you could even wipe it off if it got dirty. I will say, if your tintypes are dirty, if they're flaky, if they're anything, leave them alone. Tintypes are for scanning and then putting away and not touching, because these are just thin iron plates. This one's actually in fantastic condition. You don't want to get these wet, and you don't want to scratch them. Let me show you. Okay, here's one of the tintypes I have that is not in great condition. Bad things have happened to this tintype. This tintype has been scratched, it's been scuffed. You can see the edges are starting to rust. And so this portrait of this baby has seen better days. I am not going to try to clean this because it's going to further damage the photo. And tintypes, like ambrotypes and daguerreotypes, these were not made from negatives. That meant that if you got a tintype done, that was it. This is the only tintype. This particular tintype does not exist anywhere else in the world. It's possible that this woman paid for multiple tintypes and then sat for multiple, but just like, these are like Polaroids. Not quite that cheap, but that's the same idea. So you just you don't want to mess with them. Tintypes also, when they first came, most of them actually came in these paper sleeves. This is a tintype. You might not immediately recognize it as a tintype because it's in these paper sleeves. Most of the paper sleeves haven't survived, but the nice thing about the paper sleeve is that often they have this information on them about, you know, the photographer and things like that, and that can be helpful when dating them. So here's the hard thing. I told you, so tintypes come out in 1856, and they're really popular between 1860 and 1870. So you might think, okay, great, so I've got these 3 tintypes, so these all came out in that decade. Untrue. Here's the thing. That was when they were really popular. Tintypes still happened for a while. I mean, they were still pretty popular up until the 1880s, and then onward, You had tintypes that were at carnivals, fairs, tourist attractions, things like that. Kind of like photo booths today. You know, the photo booths that spit out the strips. Whenever my husband and I see one of those old vintage photo booths, we cram ourselves in and get a photo strip. It doesn't matter if it's $20 because it's such a fun novelty. You had people doing that up to 1900. I mean, honestly, you can still go some places and get tintypes. So that's the hard thing. These two portraits are not dated. I don't have date information. This baby has information scratched onto the back and it's not wildly clear. This is a prop photo, so I haven't done a lot to figure out what this says. I know it says 6 months old, but if you can see down here in the rest, there's a year scratched in. This portrait was taken in 1884. So this baby's tintype falls outside of what we'd assume, you know, the 1860 to 1880 generous window. This is a little bit after that. He was probably somewhere where they were still doing tintypes, whether that was, you know, middle America studio where it hadn't quite gotten out of fashion, or he was at the Jersey Shore, who knows. But anyway, that's why you can't be completely sure about tintypes. You can't say, oh, well, you know, this person, this must have been in that 20-year time period. It just doesn't work that way. Okay, so after tintypes, a good thing happens. People started making photos from negatives and they printed them on paper. Come here. And you get this. So this is a CDV, which stands for, I think it's just carte de visite, but it's a French word. I'm definitely positive that I butchered that. So CDVs are not huge. Here's that daguerreotype to show. Well, I guess also, you know, the fact that I'm holding it kind of showed the size. But these were much hardier than the other previous things because they were just paper. These were made from a negative, which meant that you could sit once, and then as the image came out, you could order 5 or 10. They were easy to mail because they're thin. So the thing that the CDV does is this is the start of family photo albums, which is fantastic and also challenging for genealogists because this is the first time that you were really going to be sending your photo to relatives or sharing your photo with family members or friends. Now, you could have done that with tintypes. Obviously, not everybody kept their tintypes to themselves. But again, tintypes were a one-time thing, so every tintype that you made was the only one that you had, and you would have had to sit and have 10 different tintypes made in order to be able to send 9 of them to your closest friends and family. But the CDV, you know, somebody could get married, somebody had a baby. If you had the money, and this was a little bit, this is, you know, it's affordable-ish, you could actually get that same photo printed and mailed out. So people started to collect them. They started to have these little cards, and that's where you get those Victorian photo albums. Oh, I should have brought one in. I've got one in the, oh well, maybe next time. And they've got the pockets, and they could slip them in. And there were a lot of the albums you see, they start out with these smaller sizes, and then they get bigger because the CDVs were, they're reasonably popular, but they were enlarged not too long after. So mostly you can tell that it's a CDV because of the small size. They're always going to be in a studio with props, you know, for most people. You didn't have people that were dragging these cameras out to take a picture of you on your homestead unless you were really, really making a lot of money. This is going to be a studio posed type photo, and it's just this thin piece of paper that is then attached to cardstock. I'm not sure if you can see, this is not, you know, printed on this thick piece of paper. It's just photo paper. The good thing about it being photo paper, so photo paper is actually processed in water. Now, not the cardboard, not this part on the back, but this part was processed in water. That means that it's much more durable. If you've got dirt and things like that, you can actually take a wet Q-tip and gently clean things like this because the photo is reasonably waterproof. Again, don't dunk this. Don't like get out the dish soap and give it a good scrub. You need to be respectful, but it's much easier to clean and handle than a tintype. Okay, so you might have some CDVs. You're almost definitely going to have cabinet cards. Cabinet cards, I think they're popular for collectors still. Lots of families had them. So the cabinet card comes out in 1866. So that's the other thing. There's only 5 years between a CDV and a cabinet card. They figured out pretty quickly that bigger was better. Cabinet cards are this bigger size. They're pretty standard. There's some variation, but almost all cabinet cards are this exact size. And there's often artwork on the card. A lot of times it says what the photographer is, who the photographer is, and where the photo was taken. And you sometimes get on the back, this is just says writing, but you sometimes get more photographer information or a big logo. So these are popular between 1866, honestly, all the way up to the early 1900s. So 35 years of a very, very popular medium. And that's because they were big, beautiful. These are also printed from negatives, so you could get multiple copies done. These, again, are easier to clean because they're photo paper. I actually did a video a little while ago where I had glue and paper from an album on a cabinet card, and I removed it using patience and a wet Q-tip. So cabinet cards I love them. But yeah, you're not going to see a cabinet card before 1866. But they do become popular pretty quickly, so it's not like they were just for the rich for a while. Also, if you have a big card like this, but it doesn't have this, it's still considered a cabinet card, not a CDV. Here's the thing, honestly, unless you're some sort of photography scholar, it almost doesn't matter, because cabinet cards and CDVs, they're basically the same time period. Like I said, this comes out in 1859. This is coming out 1865, 1866. So 5-year difference. But this is still considered a cabinet card. It's just that larger format and it actually has information on the bottom, see? But it just doesn't have that big logo. So cabinet cards are kind of the standard through the rest of the 19th century. This is what everybody has. And again, you're going to have more cabinet cards that show up in family collections that aren't of that immediate family because these were mailed around. Unlike, you can have a tintype that somebody mailed to that immediate family, but tintypes were more likely to be held near and dear to the person and their immediate family because they were just harder to reproduce. I don't know how many copies of this photo happened, but if I had 6 beautiful children and I wanted to show them off to my 11 relatives, that might be worth the investment. And again, these, as the photography changed, it just got cheaper and cheaper. So it didn't get cheap to the point where everybody could afford to do it. You don't see that again until you don't see that until the next century when the snapshot comes out, but we'll talk about that in a different video. So the other thing that I wanted to share, one more, was the Convex Portrait, which came out in 1880, and it stays popular. It stays popular until, people were still making convex portraits up until the 1940s, but you can usually tell from the style of dress when the photo was taken. This one's a little challenging. I actually know when this photo of my great-great-grandmother happened because I know how old she was, and I'm familiar with photos of her, but so convex portraits, they're easy to identify because they look like bubbles. See how this glass is curved? And they are usually, they don't always have to be this big, but they're not small. These are meant to be hung on the wall. They were sort of a luxury, but they were also really trendy and popular. So a lot of families had at least one. And what it is you've got this photo. Let's see how close I can get. So this is a photograph of my great-great-grandmother, but see how it kind of, I'm not sure if you guys can really see over Facebook, but see how it's a little bit fuzzy, a little bit artistic. I feel like, let me try to switch to this side. It's just gonna be terrible with the reflections. Here we go, maybe that's better. See how it doesn't look quite like a photo. It looks like somebody did a really nice sketch of her. What that is that you've got this photo and the photographers went through and they enhanced it with charcoal to sharpen it, kind of the same way that we would use a filter or a photo app to sharpen and darken our photos. And that helped it be extra visible through this curved glass. Now you have some that are going to be, you're going to have these thin photos that are enhanced by charcoal, and then the photo would have been molded to the glass while wet. That's going to make that photo really, really fragile, which means that if the glass breaks or if you try to take it apart, you might hurt the photo because the photo is actually going to be stuck to the curved glass. I thought that that's what we had, but if you can see, oh, it's really tough to see. I mean, I can see, but it's not. This photo is actually mounted to a piece of cardboard on the back of this frame, and it's not stuck to the glass. There is a space between the photo and the glass. It's good news for us. That means that if anything ever happened to this frame, the photo wouldn't necessarily be damaged and we could redo it. But this is the original frame that it came in, and you know, we're really careful with it. So just as a side note, this photo would have been taken of my great-great-grandmother between 1880 and 1895. It was likely taken not too long after she was brought over and auctioned off to my great-great-grandfather, who would have been a merchant. It's very likely that he paid for this portrait so that he could show off his young, beautiful bride, who he paid a lot of money for. I know that it's not later than that. I have a photo of her from 1895, which is when she was already a mother of one. And the difference in just her age is enough that I'm very confident this was taken before then. And that fits again with the timeline because these came out in 1880 and they were popular pretty quick. So again, you know, the littler photo formats, these were, you could make different copies, but people were not blowing these up. These were not wall hangings. This is as big as this got. And these ones, I mean, these were all pretty tiny. So these convex portraits in the wall, that was a really popular way to have these larger photos. And again, before then, you've got sketching and you've got painting. I mean, then if somebody comes in and paints a big family portrait of you, you can't make copies and send that to your family. Like, that's it. It's just going to sit on your wall. So photography really made portraiture much more accessible, even though not everybody could afford it. And yeah, and I will do the next century. Things move much faster in the next century, but it's actually just as interesting, and it's in a lot of ways it's actually easier to get a pinpoint on when photos came out in the next century because improvements happened so fast and things became accessible and trendy so quickly that, you know, the photos from the 1940s don't look like the photos from the 1950s, which don't look like the photos from the 1980s. And as a genealogist, that is fantastic. Anyway, that's all I'm going to leave you with today. Enjoy your Tuesday, and I'll talk to you later.